Welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's DealerOn webinar, How to Move More Metal with Predictive Analytics. My name is Eliana Raggio, and I'll be your moderator today. And today's webinar is being presented by DealerOn. For anyone who isn't familiar with DealerOn, we're an award-winning website development company and digital agency, best known for our amazing SEO, the best customer service, and the highest converting website designs in the industry, including the award-winning Chameleon responsive website platform. We got back from NADA, and we were awarded the Driving Sales Dealer Satisfaction Award for top-rated websites for an unprecedented 6th year in a row. We also took home the AWA Award for Best Websites, plus FCA announced that we're now an approved vendor. 2017 is awesome. We're still the only company in the industry that offers a money-back lead guarantee program. Do you want to know more? Yeah, you do. You can check us out at DealerOn.com. We have a great show in store for you today. We're very pleased to have Noah John as our presenter today. Noah John is the co-founder of AutoScores, a predictive analytics company that helps car dealerships forecast their inventory car sales with industry-leading accuracy by analyzing all customer behavior on their VDPs. Before AutoScores, Noah was a software engineer at EA Sports. He has a bachelor degree in computer science and another one in mathematics from Rollins College and a master's in computer science from Colorado State University. His graduate work included machine learning, neural networks, and computer science education. Noah has been an avid traveler since graduating college and even lived in Spain and South America for close to 3 years. He also has a habit of hiking the highest mountain in any area he lives. He can be reached at noah@autoscores.com. Now, during the presentation, if you have any questions, please use the question feature located on the corner of your screen to submit them. At the end of the presentation, we'll answer those questions of general interest. If we're unable to get to your question live, we're going to try to respond by email later today. And don't forget, a link to download a copy of this webinar recording will be emailed to you later today for your reference. Feel free to share it with your friends and colleagues. Oh, and guess what? Listen to this, everyone. Our good friends at AutoScores have a great giveaway on today's webinar. One of you lucky webinar attendees is going to win a free 1-hour consultation plus 4 months of free service at AutoScores. That's just under $4,000 value. Woo! What a tremendous prize for your dealership. You have to be on the live broadcast to win it, though. So stay tuned, and who knows, you might be the one walking away with this awesome prize today. Also, at the conclusion of this webinar, you're going to get a short survey, so fill it out because we're always looking for quality feedback from our audience. We want to hear what you have to say. And hey, do you tweet much? We hope you do. We'd love to see what you have to say about today's presentation, so tag us in it. You can use hashtag DealerOnWebby. I'm at Eliana Raggio. You can also hit up Noah John at Noah A. John. We look forward to seeing what you're saying. All right, everyone, let's get started. Let's learn how to move more metal with predictive analytics. Noah John, I dare say you may very well be the smartest person in any room. You studied neural networks? What? Thank you for being here.
The idea, it sounds a lot fancier than it really is, but I'm hoping to share some of that knowledge with you guys, and I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a great time, and I think this hour is going to fly by.
Let me just tell you, it doesn't really sound, it sounds really, really hard, neural networks. So thank you so much. Now, as I understand it, longtime listener, first-time presenter, thank you so much for being here, sir. And it's the first time we've ever done it on this subject. We've never done a webinar on predictive analytics. So I am stoked. Totally stoked. Well, and the fact that you made it with a metal theme, yeah, I'm all over that. So I know you have a lot to get to. And I know you have a lot of interesting things to tell the audience, so why don't you just go, just start. Tell us what we're going to be learning about today.
All right, thanks, Eliana. Let's get right into it then. So let's go over the objectives super fast. Obviously, the topic's predictive analytics, and the part I'm going to focus on is online customer behavior. And part of that's going to be explaining what it is and why it's important to your dealership. And then we're going to, after learning that, we're going to learn how to track that behavior using Google Analytics. And then after we have this info now in Google Analytics, we're going to start using it with the help of math to predict car sales. And this is the real fun part. This is the part where I'm going to really go off and get nerdy. But I want to really distill it. We're going to go through it step by step. And it's really cool once you see the process unfold. Afterwards, we're going to discuss ways to use this and improve predictions. So not only are you going to learn how to use it in your dealership, but you can also learn how to take it to the next level if you want to do that. Obviously, at the end, we've got the giveaway, which I'm super excited about. I'm looking forward to see who's going to win that.
I am
and of
too.
Course, yeah, obviously. And we've got the Q&A session at the end. The Q&A is super important, in my opinion, because the only way this webinar is going to be a success is if everyone in the audience gets something out of it. And if you need to ask a question to do that, please do so. I already told Eliana ahead of time that I'm willing to stay as long as needed to answer each and every question that you guys have. And if not, you can't do it now, shoot me an email or tweet me, text me, whatever afterwards, and I'll be happy to do it that way. So let's dive in. We've seen the objectives. We'll understand more of it as we go forward. This is about me. I always like to throw a slide in there. Eliana did a great job introducing me. I always like putting a pretty picture up because I am a hiker and traveler at heart. Whenever I'm not proudly nerding out about statistics, predictive modeling, the stuff I'll share with you today, I'm always going to try and hike and travel somewhere. This photo was taken just below the Continental Divide in Colorado at a place called Sky Pond. That's in Rocky Mountain National Park. Absolutely gorgeous. This is an exclusive for DealerOn. I'm telling everyone that I enjoy cooking. I don't know why I decided to do that, but I will tell you that I think it comes from the traveling because I'll go someplace new, try the new food, and then try and bring it back and incorporate it at home because that's just part of it. And the last one's the most important, addicted to stories. I am addicted to stories, and it definitely comes from the traveling because inevitably I will find myself on a bus, on a train, waiting or in commute somewhere, and I'll be sitting next to strangers or a group of strangers. And in order to pass the time, I found that speaking to these people was not only a way to pass the time super fast, but incredibly informative and addictive because I would learn where they were coming from and where they were going. And it's an incredible just sort of knowledge exchange that happened. And what I'm going to do in this webinar is apply the same principle. I'm going to walk you through the process of predicting car sales at your dealership by telling you a story, which in essence is a case study of this happening in a dealership. And that's the goal of today's webinar. I'm really hoping everyone will enjoy it. Now, today's theme is metal. I know Eliana was super excited about that. She's got a background in Philadelphia and radio.
Rock and roll radio, yeah.
Exactly. And this sounds a lot like a Sean Raines presentation. Now, if you don't know who Sean Raines is, Sean Raines works at DealerOn with Eliana. He's a tremendous person and a tremendous speaker. If you ever get a chance to see him speak, I highly encourage you to do so. Not only is he incredibly informative and insightful, he's also very, very entertaining and is a huge metalhead. The last session I saw him give was a digital dealer a few weeks ago at Tampa, and his theme was Metallica, so he grabbed this heavy metal font and he gave people quizzes on Metallica's albums, and he'll go off on that. So I highly encourage you to check him out. Now, I'm not quite the big metalhead that he is, so I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction. I'm going to go Iron Man metal because I am a nerd. I love the superhero movies, and I figured this is more in my wheelhouse. I know that would cause a guy like Sean to roll his eyes, but I figured, you know, at least I can put a bunch of Robert Downey Jr. references in there, and that'll be kind of fun. Plus, as Eliana pointed out, this is all coming full circle because in one of the Iron Man movies, Tony Stark and Iron Man here is wearing a Black Sabbath shirt, which is in fact the group that plays the song Iron Man, which in fact is played in the movie Iron Man. Exactly. So the goal of this slide was to get a giggle out of Eliana. So I got that. So I invested more time in this slide in getting the animations to work than any other thing. So that served its purpose. But let's actually dive into this. And we're going to dive into it with our first poll question, get our minds turned on. So Eliana, what's our first poll question?
All right, this one's an easy one. All right, audience, we need your help on these poll questions so we know what we're dealing with out here. We want to know what's going on with you and your dealership. So we want you to be honest. What is your current understanding of predictive analytics? Please select one of the following options. We use it in our dealership and it's pretty cool. I've dabbled with it, but the results weren't that great. I've heard about it, never tried it, and I kind of want to know more. I have no idea what predictive analytics is, or I think it's snake oil, but I came today anyway. So once we get a majority of the votes in, we're going to close this poll and share the results. And I got to be honest with you, I think you're going to be shocked when you see the answer that came in. I'm watching the votes come in, and I'm a little shocked. By the way, I have to say, so far I've agreed with everything that you've said. So this is boding very well for you, Noah John. So yes, I love anything having to do with Robert Downey Jr. and all of the Marvel movies. I'm a total nerd when it comes to that too. And yes, Sean Raines, absolutely amazing. Totally all about the music, and you should definitely see him live and in person when he comes to a town near you to speak, because he is like no other. So I'm absolutely up on that. All right, so now that we have some great votes in, audience, thank you so much for getting involved. I'm going to close this poll and share the results. You ready, Noah?
Oh, I'm ready. I'm on the edge of my seats.
Let's do it. All right, 3%, only 3% of today's audience says, yeah, we use predictive analytics at our dealership, and it is pretty cool. 17% of today's audience say that they've dabbled with it, but they think the results weren't that great. Now the majority, 67% of today's audience said that they've heard about it, they've never tried it, they want to know more. Boom, that's why they're here today. That is definitely a large majority. 13% of today's audience says they have no idea what it is, and luckily for us, no one thinks predictive analytics is snake oil. All right, Noah, now that we know that, where do we go from here, sir?
All right, well, regardless of where we were coming in on that, that's super interesting the way those results came in. I'm excited that a lot of the people had heard of this already. I want to define it in the case of our webinar, and I want to define it very simply. I want to say, in my opinion, with respect to dealers, it's this notion of let's not replace, but let's supplement or augment our intuition when it comes to making decisions with hard data and statistics. And this is driven by something that I'm sure is going to be familiar to a lot of the viewers watching right now, which is simply the fact there's an overload of statistics now. And what I've put up on the screen are just statistics that I've jotted down over the course of the past year when I've attended trade shows like NADA or Digital Dealer. I'll go to various sessions and someone will come up with a very interesting stat. I'll jot it down in my book. And what these stats tell a story of is that everyone is doing their car buying online. They're spending less time in the dealership. And it leads to a situation that makes it harder to simply use your intuition. People are visiting only, I believe when I saw the stat, it was 1.2 or 1.3. That was reported by NADA. That's how many people, that's how many dealerships people are visiting now. 90% of the car buying experience happens online. And then when people show up in your dealership, 2/3 of them haven't even contacted you ahead of time. So a lot of people are in the dark when it comes to that. And then Greg Gifford, who's another tremendous component of DealerOn, if you watch him give a talk, go check him out. He's tremendous. He'll say that at least half the people visiting your dealership website do it now from their mobile device. And that number goes up as you go to more rural areas. So not only have you taken this great, beautiful car dealership showroom, it's now been shrunk down to the size of a mobile device. And then you get hit over the head with, well, if they show up to your dealership, well, most of the time they're going to pull out their phone and start looking at your competitors. And then the other one that I throw in there is all the millennials. We got the millennials here and the millennials there. That's a pet peeve of mine because I'm a millennial myself. But all this noise, all this information, all this data is sort of spelling this sort of situation. How does our intuition help us with this? This is what me and my fellow millennials do when we buy cars. We eat pizza, we take selfies, and we buy cars. No, it's
Thank you for solving that mystery for us.
Yeah, so that's obviously an exaggeration, okay? However, the truth does lie underneath that, which is it's a heck of a lot harder to develop a reliable intuition when 90% of the car buying experience is online in a world that's digital, not in a world that's right in front of us. And it's hard to fit all this info in our head. Heck, I would challenge a lot of people to try and fit all these metrics and stuff that are happening online, all the information you could collect online, try and put it in Excel and make sense of it. It's hard for a single person or a group of people to make sense of it all because there's so much of it, and it's in the digital world. So the goal of predictive analytics is let's systematically collect this information and let's analyze it with the help of computers, because computers are perfect for handling this amount of information. They've been designed for this. And that's the premise behind predictive analytics. And that's what's going to drive our story moving forward. So now I've got our second poll question already. Eliana, what's the second poll question?
Second poll question is on the screen now. Now, audience, I really hope you know the answer to this question. It'll really help us out because this goes right into the math, doesn't it, Noah? How many unique visitors to your dealership website do you currently get each month? So usually we put on there an answer that says, I don't know, but that's not going to cut it today. So I need you to at least guess, all right? So please select one of the following. Do you feel that your dealership website gets less than 4,000 unique visitors every month? Between 4 and 8,000, between 8 and 12,000, between 12 and 20,000, or are you one of those rare dealerships who gets more than 20,000 unique visitors to your dealership website every month? Once we get a majority of the votes in, we're going to close this poll and share the results. We do have one more poll question coming up for you a little bit later on, so keep an eye out for that. But for right now, you guys are doing great. The votes are coming in fast, and boy, oh boy, do we really appreciate it. Now, don't forget, after Noah is done with his rockin' presentation, we are going to get into a Q&A session. That's going to be your chance to ask all the questions, all the math questions, all the questions about predictive analytics. Do I know anything about predictive analytics? Nope. But I'm looking forward to learning about it today. So if you come up with a question, send that question in. Looking forward to answering all your questions about predictive analytics. All right, Noah, if you're ready.
Oh, I'm ready. I was born ready.
I know you were. You're so ready for this. Okay, let's close this poll. Audience, thank you so much for your votes. Let's see what you had to say. All right, 23%, so almost a quarter of today's audience, say that they get less than 4,000 unique visitors on their dealership website every month. The majority, 38% of today's attendees, say they get between 4,000 and 8,000 unique visitors to their dealership website. 12% of today's audience say it's between 8,000 and 12,000 unique visitors. 19% of today's audience, oh, they're rocking it between 12 and 20,000 unique visitors. And the remaining 8% of today's audience, wow, they are holding a huge rock concert for more than 20,000 unique visitors every month on their dealership website. I don't know what the national average is. I don't know if you have that information, Noah, but I'm looking forward to seeing how this unique visitor number is going to work into predicting analytics.
Sure, and like the previous poll question, this is as much about getting our minds primed for what's coming up as it is about just sort of getting this interesting knowledge. And it's very interesting to see this information and the distribution. I do not know the national average off the top of my head, but I have seen dealerships that receive if you want to talk about the high end, they're getting 250,000, let's say 200,000 unique visitors a month. So the high end can be really dramatic when you find it, but those are in rare cases and generally in major metropolitan areas.
Oh, yeah.
So moving forward, let's get into our story. I said there's a story, and this is going to be the narrative. And the narrative starts in Colorado a number of years ago, where I'm hiking Long's Peak and I get a call. Not when I'm hiking this, but I get a call out in Colorado. I'm out in Colorado getting my master's degree in computer science, and I study a bunch of cool stuff, including machine learning, which I'll touch on later, computer vision, which is super cool. Facebook uses it all the time. If you upload a picture, not only they draw a square around people's faces because they can detect that with computer vision, they actually recognize who that friend is now and suggest, hey, you want to tag Maria in that because we know that's Maria's face. It's super cool. Also studied education, which is very useful. Awesome time. And I get a call from my best friend out there. His name's David, and he and I met when we were in undergrad. We're both fellow nerds. He was from Spain. I became his official translator freshman year because he couldn't really do it. He would just sort of nod his head. I would say, how old are you? He would say, yes. That's sort of where it was initially. But he's a very bright guy. And we ended up forming a really good friendship, and we ended up kind of living out our dreams because after we graduated, we landed our dream jobs. I ended up at EA Sports working in video games. I was super stoked about that. He worked at Microsoft on the Excel team as a program manager, and that was his dream job. So we were thrilled and on top of the world. Literally like I am sort of in this picture. I just realized that. So how about that for a good subtle sort of connection there? And then he did something that he swore to me he'd never do. He quit his dream job and he went to work for his dad. Now, why is that important to our story? Because his dad owns the largest automotive independent dealer in the country of Spain. They're based out of Madrid. They're called Canal Car. You can look them up now. They have been around for decades, over 4 decades. And what my friend did was go to that dealership and bring his tech knowledge, which wasn't really there in the dealership at the time, and set about to find ways he could improve the dealership. And along the way, he came across something that prompted him to pick up the phone and call me. And this is how the conversation started. He said, Noah, I get 60 people on my website for every up. I'm getting 60 people online for every person that walks into my showroom. And I want to look at those people online. I want to study them just like I study the people that are in my showroom. I want to size people up in my virtual showroom. I want to study them and learn from them. Because when I was a kid growing up in my father's dealership, I learned some basic principles from him and his sales staff. I learned that they could size people up that walked into their showroom with startling accuracy. They knew when a person came in and they were seriously interested in buying a car. They also knew if that person came in because they had dropped their wife off at a clinic nearby and then needed to kill an hour. Well, let's take a look at some cars. Maybe they got a Lamborghini I can check out. That would be cool. And they would know that knowing look between a husband and a wife when they really like that vehicle. They can picture the baby's seat in the back. Or if that glance between a husband and wife that says, honey, we need to get out of here. This is not what we want to do. Doesn't matter what the people say. It's through their body language, their actions. We're able to pick that up. And he and his father and his sales staff became very perceptive of that because that's what they did day in and day out. And he said, Noah, you and I both know that the same principle is true online, except instead of reading body language in the real world, we're reading the body language that manifests itself online, which is your clicks, your swipes, the actions that happen on a web page. And he said, there's so much for me to do. There's so much for me to analyze because there's so many things people can click on. There's so many actions available to them. What you're looking at right now is an example of one of his VDPs at his dealership. That's why everything is in Spanish. That's why you see Canal Car in the upper left. And all the red flashing you're seeing is something we put together where we literally are highlighting in red whenever people click on something. Or if in the case of this submission form that's being filled out right now, someone's actually typing something in. He said, man, there's so many things that I can look at and study. What things mean they're more interested? What things means they're less interested? Just by looking at this video going, you'll see that that small arrow in the middle, the small red square that's always flashing to advance right in terms of the video, the photo carousel. That's what's being clicked on the most in this page. And this, of course, is over the course of a day and it's being sped up. But there's a lot of things that we could look at. And he said to me, Noah, you and I know that the large companies, the Googles, the Facebooks, your Spotifys, your Netflix, they've been looking at online behavior for a while now. They've been studying it and using it because they know that people can't help but reveal their intentions, their likes and dislikes through their actions. And this is true both offline, like my father and salespeople know in their showroom, and it's also true online. But he said, I want to be a healthy skeptic. I know auto is unique. So I want to make sure this also works in the automotive world. I just don't want to assume it works because it works for Google and Amazon and those big guys. Auto is unique. So he said, no, I want you to come in and I want us to study this ourselves and basically conduct a pilot study. And the pilot study's goal is to prove what we just mentioned before. Do people's actions and behavior on an automotive website, on a dealership website, does that show their interest and disinterest in buying that particular vehicle? And that's the basis, that's the prologue of our story. So now, before we head into the main part of the narrative, we have another poll question. Eliana, what do we have now?
Oh, it's our final poll question. So, audience, when it comes to predicting the sale of a car, how important do you think VDP views are? Please select one of the following options. Do you think VDP views are extremely important, very important, somewhat important, not really important, or nope, not important at all? When it comes to predicting the sale of a car, how important do you think VDP views are? All right, so wait till you see these votes coming in. Audience, thank you so much for sending in your votes. And I'm sure after we're done with this, Noah's going to tell us what the right answer is. Right, Noah?
That's going to come towards the end. It's not going to come right away, but I will circle back to this. Absolutely.
Okay, all right. So do you want me to share the results or you want me to wait to share the results?
I would show it now, and we can always circle
All right.
back to this if we need to.
We can certainly do that. All right, audience, thank you so much for all of your votes. So when it comes to predicting the sale of a car, how important do you think VDP views are? Well, let's see what you had to say. Let's close this poll and share the results. All right. So the majority, 55% of today's audience, said extremely important. Another nice majority, 34%, said very important. And the remaining, well, it says 10%, it should be 11%, said somewhat important. And no one said it's not really important, and no one said it's not important at all. So
Very interesting.
very interesting indeed.
All right, so we're going to keep that in our minds. We're going to circle back to that.
All right.
We certainly
Let me
will.
know. I can post it up again, I believe, when the timer arises. All right. So where do we go from here?
All right, awesome. So I gave you the prologue. Let's start with the pilot study. We're engineers. We're pragmatic. We want to do something fast. We don't want to try and do this exhaustive study. Let's try and do something rapidly and get a result that sort of, as a proof of concept, would encourage us to continue with a more extensive study. So AKA, let's do something quick and dirty. So what info do we have that was most readily available? We said, let's choose the information that's easiest for us to get our hands on. And in our case, it was VDP views, emails, and calls. And this came from an auto trader-like service in Spain called coches.net, which is cars.net in Spanish. And this information was for each vehicle in our inventory. So we knew the views, emails, and calls for each vehicle in our inventory. So what do we do with this information? Well, we're going to do some correlation analysis, our first foray into some mathematical stuff. Now, the Excel geniuses out there and the math nerds probably already know you've got a correlate function. That's your second bullet that I'm going to circle right here with my mouse. The correlate function, that'll give you the correlation directly using a function in Excel. In order to do that, you'll need to add another column in your table that shows if a car is sold or not. Don't worry if you don't understand that. I'm going to explain in a more intuitive way because I want to make sure we're all on the same page. So I'm going to keep this as simple and as digestible as possible. If I'm going slow for some of the smarter people, please be patient with me. So you take this information that we got from coches.net, our auto trader-like service, and we put into a table where we had all our vehicles in our inventory. So you're looking at a table right now where you've got your vehicles in the leftmost column, you've got your views in the second column, the emails in the third, and the calls in the last and fourth column. So to make sure we're all on the same page, if we were to take a look at this first row where we see an Audi A4, this vehicle in the last 2 weeks, that's important, the last 2 weeks, received 340 VDP views, 1 email, and 2 calls. Now, why 14 days? Why the last 2 weeks? Because intuitively to us, we figured if a car, God forbid, has been on our lot for 3 months and now sells, do we really care about what happened on our VDP? Do we care about what people were doing online in that first week, second week, first month? Not really. We want to actually, at least what we thought was at the time, let's look closer to the time of sale. Let's look at just the last 2 weeks. So that's what you're seeing. Each row represents what happened in the last 2 weeks for each of these vehicles. So we went ahead and did a correlation analysis. What's a correlation? Well, in the strictest mathematical terms, it's a relationship between two things. What are two things that are easy to think about in our world? How about mileage and price? So Eliana, what's going to happen to if I take a car and its mileage goes up, what's going to happen to its price?
Oh, the price should go down.
Absolutely. And that's the example of a negative correlation. As one thing goes up, the other thing goes down. And then if we had a positive correlation, so if we lived in a world where, God, imagine this, as mileage goes up, price goes up. So Eliana, you could drive from Philadelphia to Florida, go to Disney World, where I know you love to go, and then drive back. You put on thousands of miles on your car. Well, now the price of that car has gone up, the value of it's gone up in some bizarre world. That's the example of a positive correlation. Whereas one thing goes up, the other thing goes up. And then if we lived in a world where as mileage went up, price sometimes went up, sometimes went down, sometimes went up, sometimes went down, it was random, that would be an example of no correlation or zero correlation. And for the nerds out there that were wondering or want me to say this, a correlation is strictly a value between -1 and 1 inclusive. And also for those of you wondering, Eliana is not in fact in love with going to Disney World. That was just a little jab between me and her. Now, how do we do the correlation analysis with this table in an intuitive way? Well, one way to do it is to simply sort by one of these columns. So let's sort by VDP views. And then we watch as vehicles sell. And as vehicles sell, we can go ahead and cross them off the list. And if VDP views were to correlate with sales, we should see that we're crossing vehicles more at the top of the list than at the bottom, because the more views means it would be more likely to sell. What we found was we were crossing cars off all over the place. Really wasn't much of a correlation. So then we sorted by emails. So we take this third column, and now we would sort it by email so that the ones with the most emails would be at the top. Same thing, cross vehicles off as they sell. If we were crossing more things off as the top, we'd be like, oh, cool, there's a correlation between emails and sales. Sadly, that wasn't the case. It was all over the place. We repeated with calls, sorted by calls, watched the vehicles sell, crossed them off the list. Lo and behold, no luck, all over the place. So did we give up? Were we done?
No.
Well, absolutely not. We weren't done, exactly. Okay? It's got us thinking. It's got us having a discussion about what was more important. Take a look at the vehicle at the very bottom. We've got an Audi A4 that has only 13 VDP views, yet it already still managed to generate a lead submission in the form of an email. And we said, is that better? I mean, we already got a lead from just 13 views. Is that a better indicator? Or do we just want a lot of views like we see at the very top of the list? Well, we started thinking about it and we said, okay, can we somehow combine this idea into something that better represents what we're trying to hit? So we came up with this idea. So you're looking at the exact same table with the exact same cars, the exact same information, except we've added another column on the far right, which we've highlighted in orange. And that represents if we were to take emails and calls, add them together, and divide by VDP views. So to make sure we're all on the same page, if you look at the first row now, you'll see that if you take emails and calls, you've got 1 plus 0, so you've got 1, and you divide by 13 views, and you're going to get 7.7%. Again, if you're representing the answer as a percentage, you'll get 7.7%. And a lot of you out there might be thinking, well, that looks like a goal conversion, and it is. It's a goal conversion of sorts. How many VDP views are necessary to generate a lead submission? And we looked at this, and we repeated our correlation analysis. Obviously, you do that in Excel super fast. But if we do the intuitive way, you sort this list, this table, by this new column, the highest values at the top, you watch cars sell. If you're crossing vehicles up more at the top of the list, you found yourself something that has a bit of a positive correlation. And lo and behold, we found a slight positive correlation. So now we knew this thing had legs. It was far from being anything useful, but it certainly showed us that there was There was life there. And this thing could be built upon and taken a step further. So that was our pilot study. He said, okay, now we can invest time in a more rigorous case study.
Now, we did have a question that came in specifically about your pilot study. Dan wanted to know, was that study done in 2010?
That study was done in around, I believe it was 2011 or 2012 at the Canal Car dealership in Spain.
Got it. All right, Dan, thank you for the question. Please keep going. It's fascinating.
Okay, cool. And keep those questions coming. And if not, if you want to ask them at the end, just jot them down. And like I said, I will answer them all at the end. I'm happy to stay as long as needed. So now we're going to say, well, let's do a case study. Let's study this more in depth. And the statisticians in us knew that that meant we now had to go out and not just get the most readily and easily available information. Let's grab as much information as possible. We need more data. We need more information. And a lot of important stuff can be gleaned. If you just think back to the video I showed of all the flashing lights, a lot can be gleaned from a lot of those actions. I want to just pick out one as an example to highlight. Let's think about our good old lead submission form. And imagine Tony Stark is here. He's interested in this Nissan Pathfinder, and he says, cool, I'm going to click on Contact Us. I want to put in my first name. I want to put in my last name. I'll put in my email address. It's tony@stark.com. And there we go. I'm ready to submit. They want my phone number. It's like, I don't really want to put in my phone number. That's too personal. I'm going to roll my eyes at that, and I'll try to submit. But it gets denied because the form is set up in such a way where you need the daytime phone number. So in this case, Tony Stark says, well, the heck with this. I've got better things to do with my time. I still don't want to give him my phone number. I'm going to leave. I got to fight crime. I got aliens invading, you know, their loss. Now, in our world, this wasn't being recorded because we just had a view, an email, and a call. We didn't know if someone had started to fill out a form, but I think it's pretty intuitive to see that Tony, in this case, made more effort and was more interested than your average window shopper because he clicked on that button and he started filling out information. He was willing to give us his name and his email. That's more than what the average shopper would want to do because I think he was showing more interest. And these sort of scenarios are the kind of scenarios that can be gleaned if you study all the actions and behaviors happening on a VDP. So the goal is, well, this is the information we want. How do we gather it so we can add it to this formula idea that we've created during the pilot study? Well, Google Analytics seems like the answer. Sure, a lot of you have used Google Analytics. It is a tremendous tool. It's very powerful. It reports on so many awesome things. We've got our Google Analytics account. Let's dive in now and start getting the information we need from Google Analytics. So let's take a closer look at what we actually get out of the box from Google Analytics, what we got out of the box by default. Well, if you take a look, we get sessions and page views, and that lines up with VDP views. And we get goal conversions, which in our case lined up with lead submissions, which, if you think about it, that sort of sounds like what we had before because we had views, emails, and calls. So what exactly does that mean? Well, I'm going to fast forward and give you the punchline of what was happening in our case at our dealership. By default, we were only getting 3% of the total online customer interactions happening on our website. Meaning all those red flashing lights that you saw, a lot of that, all that represented 97% of uncollected information. Now, am I saying Google Analytics is a terrible tool? Absolutely not. It's just not something that will allow you to do something like this out of the box. The smart people at Google have a mechanism called events. They solve this problem, but it's not a problem that they can solve without some help from you. Okay? And what an event is is if you were to go into Google Analytics and go to the behavior menu, and at the time you're viewing this, things might have changed slightly because Google's always updating how their things look. But at the time of this webinar, we've got a behavior option, and below that we've got events. And if you track events in Google Analytics, they'll pop up here. And you can see them as they come in, and of course you could break them down. Now, how do you set up an event? Well, at a real high level, what an event is simply an asynchronous Java call. You don't have to understand what that is, what I'm saying in that part. But what you're basically going to do is attach a little event to each clickable element in the HTML of your website. You're going to give each event a name so that when someone clicks on something that you want to track, an event gets sent to the Google servers, and it gets saved and will show up in the events panel. And Google will handle the work of saying, oh, well, it came from this VDP, this vehicle. It came from here. You just need to give it a name so it knows how to track it. If you have more questions about this, ask me afterwards, okay? You can work with your webmaster to set this up. You set up once and you're good to go. Now, what did we do now that we had the mechanism to track the events? Well, we still wanted to be pragmatic. So we said, okay, let's not go hog wild and put events everywhere. Let's pick out the ones that we think are the most important, what we think are the most relevant to a sale and showing interest. So these are the 17 we selected. If you take a look, really that last one is a VDP view. So in actuality, we're looking at 16 events that we added. And the names we gave them were very, very mechanical, very kind of generic. We wanted to be blatantly obvious what each event was referring to, which is why you see, for example, number 3, credit form opened. Well, we all know what happens there. Someone opened the credit form. Credit form submitted. Same thing. Someone submitted the credit form. We didn't want any ambiguity. We wanted it to be blatantly obvious. So now we're tracking these events. They're showing up in Google Analytics under our Events tab. We can sort and filter them the way we want. Awesome. Now, how do we take this information, that more information we're looking for, and incorporate it into the formula idea that we had conceived in the pilot study? Well, we start by doing this. You're looking at a table that shows not all of the events because they wouldn't fit, but some of the events in the left column. In the second column on the right, we've got a point value. We have to assign point values to each of the events. I'm sure everyone's thinking, okay, what's a point value and how do I assign it? Well, a point value is what we think that event does to show buying interest in that particular vehicle. Because again, we're in a world where these events are occurring on a VDP. And that VDP is with respect to a specific car. Okay? So if we were to look at this, we're saying out of the events listed, we think if someone submits an inquiry form, because we gave it the highest point value, we think that shows the most interest in buying a car than the other events listed. Now, it's important to note that it doesn't really matter what number you give to the point values. What really matters is the relationship between the various point values, the ratio between them. I think a lot of you might be thinking, well, that sounds like a coefficient, and you'd be exactly right. So it doesn't matter if you give event 1 a value of 1, and so if you give event A 1 point and event B 3 points, you could simply also say 2 points and 6 points, or 3 points and 9 points, because what matters is event B is 3 times event A. So it's that ratio that matters. So now the question is, well, how do you pick these point values, Noah? Well, we were able to come up with point values one of 2 ways. One way leveraged information, historical information we actually had in our own dealership. Let's take a look at 2 events right now. Credit form submitted and inquiry form submitted. Let's think about what those events actually do. They both create a lead submission, or an email rather, that ends up in our CRM. And that comes along with an email address, the car they're interested in, all that good stuff, which means it's now suddenly trackable. And we know what that person ultimately does. So we at the time looked back as far as we could, at least a year in our CRM, and looked at how many people submitted inquiry forms and how many of them bought cars, and likewise with credit forms. And what we found by looking at our historical data from the dealership and the CRM is we found out that people that submitted inquiry forms were a little more than twice as likely to buy a car than people that submitted credit forms, which is why when you look at the 2-point values, 35 is a little more than twice 15. And that's how you can come up with some of these point values. There are other events that you don't have some historical data you can lean on to do or to leverage to come up with. And in those cases, we had to sort of come up with our best intuitive, educated guess. We went off to our separate corners, we fiddled on a piece of paper, got back together, collaborated, fiddled here, fiddled there, and did some trial and error. This is not something that happens right away. It takes some time, it takes some effort. You need to do some experimentation. But once you have the point values, you're able to go into the next step, which is starting to make predictions. So what we're looking at here is an example of a single car in our inventory listed at the top. We've got a 2008 Audi A4. We're in Europe, always Audi. A lot of Audis over there. Now, again, in the first column, we've got some events listed. Again, not all of them because we don't have the room, but these are the events from the previous slide. In the second column, which we've labeled A, we've got the point values that we assigned from the previous slide. And then in the third column, which we've labeled B, we have the number of times that particular event occurred in the last 2 weeks for this particular vehicle, which is exactly what we were doing before in the pilot study, except it was just VDP views, emails, and calls. But now, because of Google Analytics and the events that we're tracking, we have those same numbers for all these events. And then in the last column, the fourth column, we simply take the product of the inner two columns. We multiply A and B. So to make sure we're all on the same page, if you take a look at the first row, for credit form opened, we gave it a point value of 3. That event occurred 10 times in the last 2 weeks for this Audi. You multiply them together, and you get 50. We're doing math. We're happy. Life is good. Okay? Trying to keep this simple. And then what we do is we add up the totals in the last column to get a total down here of 744 points. Okay? Now, if we repeat the process with the rest of the vehicles in our inventory, we now have a list similar to what we had before. And now we can sort the list by this point total. And we can do our correlation analysis. And again, using that sort of simplified intuitive idea that I was talking about, if we start watching these vehicles sell and we start crossing them off the list, rather as we see them sell, we found that we're crossing off a lot more vehicles now at the top of the list. We're getting a stronger correlation than before. And we actually, after fiddling it and studying it more, we found that there are these thresholds in our dealership where vehicles that had, for example, above around 700 points would likely sell in the next 7 days. And conversely, vehicles that were around the 130 point mark, anything below that, they were going to sit there for a while. And that was really cool, and we were super excited with this result. Now, I hope everyone out there listening and watching this webinar is thinking, Noah, this is great. I love your enthusiasm. I love the fact you're saying this is working. It's great. It's awesome. You're enjoying it. This is great. But you haven't given me a number that I can wrap my head around that's relatable. So in our case, the number is, using this method, we were able to predict 5 out of every 7 sales in our dealership. So if we think about this, that means 5 out of 7 sales we knew ahead of time thanks to this method. And that's the power of using something like predictive analytics. It allows us to take a lot of information and distill it into something that's more digestible. And then that information we can use to make better decisions. And that is the real meat of the math part. That's the real meat of this webinar. But what we're going to do now as sort of an epilogue is go through some takeaways now from this case study. Applications, results, things that are even more relatable to the dealerships out there. So fun fact number one is they now use machine learning to predict car sales. Now, I studied machine learning in graduate school. It's something that people can do a PhD thesis on and spend a life doing. There's a lot. It's a rich and beautiful field. And I just want to go over it at a very high level. It's not Ultron taking over the world. Okay, it's not sentient robots, right, that are trying to do that. It's something a lot more, very generic almost. It's simply the application of computers to large sets of information to find patterns, correlations, and relationships, which is kind of what we were doing before. So why not have a computer do it where its results are backed by statistical rigor, and it does it for you so you don't have to spend time fiddling with point values and all this other stuff. Let it do the trial and error and optimize based on the equations that it's using. It's statistics with the application of computers. Fun fact number two is they now track over 90,000 events daily on their VDPs. So they've obviously tracked more than those 17 events that we showed previously. They track upwards of over 200, close to 300 now, and those result in 90 different things happening every day on their VDPs. That's a lot of information. And I highly encourage anyone listening and watching this, doesn't matter where you fall on the predictive analytics side of things, I highly encourage you to at least track the events, because whether you choose to use that information now, it's your information and it's going to be useful at some point. So start collecting it now so you have it. It's your information and it's happening on your website. Now we come back to that poll question, VDP views, where over half of you, I recall, said that they strongly correlated with sales. Is that correct, Eliana?
Here, I'll put them up on the screen right now. 55% of today's audience said that when it came to predicting the sale of a car, that they thought VDP views were extremely important. 34% said very important, and 10% said somewhat important. Awesome.
Okay, so this is the thought process we had going into this. It seemed intuitively true. This is what we found out. What we found out was VDP views barely correlated with sales.
What?
Exactly. That's what we said. That was very counterintuitive. Now, the point of this slide is not to say the 55% of people that said VDP views strongly correlate with sales are wrong. Not true. I've worked with dealerships where VDP views do strongly correlate with sales. The point of this slide is to point out is that there's no universal rule. You have to find out for yourself in your particular dealership case. You cannot assume it's one way or the other. It was counterintuitive to us. But what we found was you could have a vehicle in our dealership with 300 views and another one with 30, and that one with 300 views was only marginally, fractionally more likely to sell. So you need to know, you need to study this for yourself in order to know. But it can be a variety of things. So it's not a point of being a hard rule. It's saying you have to find out for yourself. And this was a counterintuitive result because, like everyone else, we thought, hey, the more hits, the better.
So it's not really the number of views that really is important. It's what the consumer does once they reach the VDP that's important.
Well, there's a lot. So, you hear people talk about, and I'll just go back, you hear a lot of people talk about quality of web traffic. That's something you hear a lot about, and that sort of ties into this. But it is true. If you just think about it from a very sort of simpleton point of view, if you're only looking at a VDP view, so if I'm looking at a VDP view and that's the only thing I'm looking at, how do I know if that person is a window shopper or a person that really likes the car? And all I know is they look at the car. It's hard to know just from that. You have to look at other things in order to derive that. But if you want to find out if VDP views do correlate with sales, you just do the correlation analysis yourself in your dealership. And then you can know how much weight you can put into that metric, because the amount of weight you can put into that metric is going to vary across dealerships. Now, outcomes. At this dealership at Canal Car, over 2 years, they increased their monthly rotation by 28%, and they did that without affecting their net profit margin. I mean, this is just a gaudy stat. I'm sure everyone loves this stat. We all want this. It's a great stat. I am not going to come out here and say this positive result over the last 2 years was solely the responsibility of predicting car sales using the techniques that we just discussed. Absolutely not. However, because there's a lot of things that affect this. However, I will say this. It was the one major change that they made to their process in their dealership over that period of time, and it had a significant effect. And the next slide is going to make it very obvious how that effect came about, because they changed their repricing strategy. They used to list the vehicle and wait 14 days. And then they'd revisit the vehicle if it had not sold yet.
Oh,
and
yeah,
again,
a lot of dealerships do that. Yeah.
Absolutely. You take a look at the factors you look at, the metrics you look at, price to market, competitive set, all that good stuff. Take your market knowledge, your customer knowledge, all that, your intuition, right? And you decide if you want to hold or drop the price. Okay, cool. Well, their change in repricing is they don't wait the 14 days like they used to. They're much more proactive. If they see within 48 hours, as long as their photo's up, right, and that's a good representation of the vehicle, if they see that that car isn't getting traction through the behavior that their customers are showing online, that they're showing that they're not interested in buying that car, they'll proactively drop the price a little bit, not as much as they might at the 14-day mark, to see if they can move that car and get some movement on it, get some action on it. And that's an example of how, because they were able to rotate faster, but the stat before goes along with it, they didn't affect their net profit margin. So by being more proactive, by being strategic in which cars they wanted to drop the price of earlier, they were able to move them, which is why this goes in tandem with that previous slide. Now, the last outcome is my favorite, and that's this. In the first 8 months of 2016, they increased the price of 92 cars for an average of 700 euros. And they sold 67 of them at the increased price within 10 days of the increase, which resulted in nearly 47,000 euros of additional profit.
All right, do the math for me.
Not a bad little start.
It sounds great. How much is a euro in dollars?
Well, the exchange rate has changed. It's become closer to the dollar. I think in early 2016, it was somewhere between $1 or like $1.10, $1.15 to a euro. Now it's closer to 1 to 1. Don't hold me to that. But the euro's always been a little stronger than the dollar, but it's been dropping over the past few years.
So basically, all they did was use predictive analytics, massage their pricing structure, and they, just from doing that, got more cars through the dealership and made a $50,000 profit.
Yeah, but let me give you the story behind it, because the story is hilarious. Imagine the look. Remember, my friend David comes in to take over his father's business. The father's been running this dealership for over 4 decades, okay? He's been doing extremely well. They've been rocking and rolling. His father possesses all this knowledge that he's been trying to transmit to his son so his son can take over. And now he's having a much later schedule. He shows up in the mornings occasionally. You know, he takes more time off in the summer. His son's running the show, and he's a proud and happy father. He walks in one morning, and he finds out his son has raised the price of a vehicle. And he's thinking, my God, I taught my son all these things about running a dealership. You make your money when you buy the car. You evaluate it properly. You buy it at the right price. You know your market. You sell it properly. You take care of it. You do the recon. You don't raise the price of a car. You figured that process out already. And he was furious. And all my friend could do was say, Papa, just be patient. Just wait and see. And he just stormed off.
Really?
Okay? Well, he can tell the story better, okay? But 2 days later, father shows up, and my friend David gets to say, Papa, we sold the car. Now imagine the look of dumbfoundedness on this guy's face. He's over 70 years old. He's been working in cars for over 40 years, close to 50 years, okay? It was as if money had just popped out of thin air, like a David Blaine trick had occurred. He was blown away. He's like, how did this happen? Now, to make this more relatable to my audience in America, I talk to dealers all the time, and I talked to a dealer in Florida last year, and I asked him, do you ever raise the price of a car? He said, absolutely not. And then he stopped me. He said, you know what? I did raise the price of a car once. I said, well, tell me what happened. He said, well, I got a beautiful Ford F-150 on trade. I got the photos, I got beautiful photos taken, put it up on my website. An hour later, I got a call out of state on it. And then after that phone call, I went right to my pre-owned sales manager and said, we need to raise the price of this Ford F-150 right now because there's something about it we missed. For whatever reason, there are people out of state already calling about it. We need to bump up the price now. Now, if he didn't have someone picking up the phone and calling him from out of state, he wouldn't have been the wiser. However, the first point of contact for that truck is going to be online through his website. So whether or not he gets a call or not, if he was looking at the behavior being shown on that truck's VDP, he would have seen that people were showing a very strong interest in purchasing the truck. And he could have reacted, which is what my friend David does now in his dealership. And now they don't have that sensation that they have sometimes of selling a car almost too fast, where they'd list a car and leave the lot, and for like an hour there, they'd be scratching their heads thinking, well, did we miss something with that car? Did we like leave some money on the table?
Could we have made a bigger profit, right?
Yeah, but I mean, an hour later, that they forget about it because they're selling cars. They sold the car. They're happy. They move on. But they don't have that sensation anymore because now they're looking at what's happening on their website, and within 24 hours, 48 hours, they can see if people are showing monster interest in purchasing that car so they can react to it, adjust its price accordingly, and not leave money on the table. And that's the power and an example of predictive analytics being used in a dealership. So that is really the conclusion of the story. I want to share with you some suggested resources.
Oh.
They're kind of all over the place in terms of, varying degrees of nerdiness. The first is an article that I wrote in Dealer Magazine that's sort of a high-level intro to predictive analytics. I suggest you check that out. Then if you want a good example of what predictive analytics is doing in general and what these companies are capable of, check out DeepMind. They're a great example of it. They're not specifically in auto, but they're just a good example. If you want to understand machine learning better, that third link is awesome. Check out their first video. They really simplify things and distill it so you even understand some of the more complex concepts of machine learning, which I really just glazed over at a high level at a very digestible and easy to understand way, and it's super cool. Then, of course, the documents for Google Analytics tracking. If you want to dive into that and do that, that's a great place to start. If you're interested in studying some of this, Stanford has a great online course that was free. It might not be free right now because it's on Coursera instead of the Stanford EDU website, so you'd have to check that out. And of course, if you don't do anything and you have not seen the Thor Ragnarok trailer that came out a couple weeks ago, you need to, after this webinar, go check it out. It's the most metal Marvel trailer you'll ever see. They're playing Led Zeppelin the whole time. It's absolutely awesome, and I watched it before this webinar to get pumped up for it. So
I have to go see it. I didn't see that
check
yet.
that out. And so, plus it's got Chris Helmsworth, that I think Eliana would be a fan of.
I mean,
so
I need more Thor in my life, sure.
Exactly. And then here's some action items, okay, to get you guys started. Go back to your dealership, find that geek in your dealership, and let them own this. It's much better when you have, someone that enjoys this stuff and that someone that's willing to accept responsibility for it, because it requires some time. Get started at a small level like we did. Pick out 15 to 20 clickable actions on your VDPs that you think are important, and then start tracking them. And you can have that track with the help of your webmaster. Or if there's someone in-house to do it, have them do it if they have access to the HTML. It's not hard. You do it once, and then it's done. And now, if you don't do anything else and you do those first 3 bullets, I'll be happy, because think back to what I said. That dealership in Spain is collecting 90,000 events a day. That information is useful, period, whether you're using it for predictive analytics or something else. Or maybe some cool invention is going to happen. Maybe in 5 years I'm going to come back, Eliana, Forget this predictive analytics. There's this new type of analytics. It's even better. Still needs that information. It's yours. It's going to be useful whether it's now or in the future.
And you think it should be done in 2-week increments?
Experiment with that. That's something that's totally experimentable. You know, you could do 2 weeks, you could do a week, you could do a month, give it a try. I think that dealerships that we had a number of dealerships that were under the 4,000 mark, or between the 4,000 and 8,000 mark.
Right.
If you're around 5K or less, you're probably going to want to stretch what you're looking at to a slightly bigger sort of area. So instead of 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, simply because you're not getting as many, you're not driving as much traffic to BDP simply because of the numbers you have.
Yeah, you want the data points. You want a larger data pool.
Exactly, exactly. But I will say this, the limitation to this is data. If you don't have enough of it, accuracy will go down. So don't be discouraged if you have a dealership with 3,000 monthly views and you're not quite getting some, that you might be just below that threshold where things can get accurate. And that's the reality. In fact, I would say you might even want to talk to guys at DealerOn to work about SEO and SEM, cheap plug. You know, invest in driving that traffic, and then you get the added benefit of, hey, now I have more information. I have a sufficient amount of information that I can now plug into these models and formula. And then if you want, I highly encourage you, and this is why I said have a geek own this. This is a tricky step, but it's a necessary step in my opinion. You need to set up a way to export this information easily, because you don't want to go into Google Analytics all the time and cut and paste. God forbid we cut and paste. You want to do this automatically and automate it. And the great thing with Google Analytics is that it's very well coupled with Google Sheets. So anyone with a little tech knowledge can export that stuff into a Google Sheet and do that automatically for you. So that way you're saving yourself what could be a slightly tedious step. And then of course, create the formula in Excel or Google Sheets or whatever your spreadsheet app of choice is, and use that to total up point values for each vehicle in your inventory. In essence, creating that formula where you're multiplying the point values, which are coefficients, by the number of times the corresponding events happen for that particular vehicle. Now, I've spoken enough. Let's tailor this to the audience. I'm going to reiterate one more time. Honest to God, I will talk your ears off about this stuff if that's not immediately apparent. I love it. I'm passionate about it. If you don't have time to ask a question now, please ask it via email or Twitter or whatever, and I will happily answer those things for you. But I think, Eliana, I think it's that time, Eliana. That time.
It is
it's
that
prize
time.
alert time.
It is. Before we get to the prize, however, I do want to direct everyone's attention over to the handout section of the GoToWebinar interface. In that handout section, you can download today's slide deck up until the very end of this broadcast. So yeah, Noah's slide deck available in there right now for immediate download. It had really a lot of cool stuff in there, so you might want to have it for yourself. Now, oh yeah, it's that time. You can turn on your webcam, by the way, if you'd like. If you missed it at the beginning of the webinar, I announced that our good friends over at AutoScores, they're giving away a great prize on today's webinar. One of you lucky webinar attendees is going to win a huge prize. It's a free 1-hour consultation and 4 months of free service at AutoScores. This prize is valued at just under $4,000. Holla. What a tremendous prize. Okay, so what I need you to do is get ready, get to your keyboards. First person to write in the correct response to our giveaway question is going to be winning this awesome prize today. Now, if you're a vendor, we love having you. You're always welcome on a DealerOn webinar, but we're going to ask you to please sit this one out. As you can probably tell, this prize is intended for dealership personnel only. All right, everyone, here we go, and good luck. I hope you guys were paying attention. So, earlier in the presentation, when Noah was discussing the case study, what percentage of online customer interactions occurred on the dealer's website that was not collected by Google Analytics by default? Ooh, John Paradise, look at you. Came in early with the correct answer of 97%.
Holy cow, that was fast.
Oh, super fast. Are you kidding? I got a ton of them over here. John
Thank you so
Paradise.
much for
I
paying
have to
attention.
admit,
That's awesome.
I don't recall your name ever coming across my screen, John Paradise. So I'm wondering if you are new to a DealerOn webinar. Oh, look, he put in a smiley face. And what dealership are you from so I can give you a proper congratulations? He says, I generally don't answer the questions, but I'm a long-time listener. Well, I like it. Good for you. You just won your dealership, Keys Chevrolet in Menominee. I hope I said that right, Wisconsin. You just won yourself a $4,000 prize. What? Yes, maybe you should answer questions more often. You seem to be doing really well with it, Mr. Paradise. Well, I'll tell you what, John. You're going to be hearing from our good friends over at AutoScores about collecting that prize for Keys Chevrolet. Congratulations. Huge win today, my friend. I hope you enjoy it. He says, thanks, by the way. And I know we had one awesome prize today. It's okay. You know what? We give away cool prizes every week. So come on back to another DealerOn webinar. And who knows, that could be the day you win a cool prize on a DealerOn webinar. But for right now, we're saying congratulations to John Paradise from Keys Chevrolet. And of course, we got to thank our good friends over at AutoScores for their incredible generosity. So thank you so much for that, sir.
No problem. And John, we'll once we get our contact information from Eliana, we'll be reaching out to you and we'll get started.
All right. I like that too. All right, John, and good luck with that, John. And he says, fantastic. Thanks again. All right. So we have some really interesting questions that came in. So if you're ready, let's go to the next slide. All right. So I'm just going to let you know, as you can probably tell, yes, Noah self-admittedly loves to talk about this predictive analytics stuff, and it is pretty cool, but it's kind of heady stuff too. So we do have some great questions, but if your question doesn't get asked here, or maybe you just want to take it offline, his contact information is right there, and as you can tell, he's pretty nice guy to talk to.
Bring it my way.
Bring it.
My way. I will talk about anything and anywhere.
I love it. Okay. So first question came in from Dan, who, by the way, was all over this Spain connection. He's like, let me get this straight. And he like did some searching, and then he must have written to me like 4 times before he's like, this is it. This is the one. So he found canalcar.es because he was like, I got to find out what dealership he's talking about. So Dan did a little bit of investigative work, right? So then he came back, and then he's like, okay, so this formula is really only for used cars?
Okay, so that's an excellent question. The formula is not, it's applicable for any vehicle. What I talked about as things they were doing in their dealership is more applicable in pre-owned, because if you're talking about repricing a car, you're obviously going to have more flexibility when it comes to pre-owned, because you're not mandated by the OEM when it comes to new. And every pre-owned car is kind of its own story, so you also have that extra bonus. But the principle applies to any vehicle that's listed on a VDP on a dealership website. It's just that what you're able to do with that information differs between pre-owned and new. We're currently exploring the possibility of taking, for example, this score, and some dealers of ours that we work with are kind of fiddling with this notion of, well, let's take a look at our new inventory.
Right.
And let's allocate our marketing budget a little bit, meaning if we have cars that already have high point values based on this formula, but we're spending all this, but we're thinking about spending more money marketing and driving traffic to those cars, we won't do that. We'll try and drive eyes to other cars that might have lower scores. I can't tell you what the results of that is because it's early on in that experimentation, but the general principle applies to any car that's listed. It's just what you're able to do differs if it's a pre-owned or a new vehicle.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. So we did.
Great question.
Oh, you got more coming in from Dan, let me tell you.
Okay.
Dan was very vocal today. So Dan wrote in, okay, so not a criticism, but is this case study your very first research product or what your process is now? If the former, because what has changed in 5 years? Or is the process still the same? Have you upgraded it in the last 5 years? Is it more sophisticated and iterated with more data in your model?
So the principle that I've outlined was, in essence, the V1 of what was done in this dealership in Spain.
Okay.
And now there's that component of using machine learning where they're saying, let's automate what we were doing manually before by using this concept of machine learning, using the application of computers and statistical modeling. That requires a little more, that's not something that the average person off the street will generally know. So that's something that if you have a background in that, you can certainly apply this. It requires some thought. But I can tell you in terms of case studies that we're doing, that was one of the earlier ones. What we're working on now, I'll let this slip, okay? What's sort of on the horizon is we want to look at what the correlation is. So we talked about VDP views in our case not correlating strongly with sales in our dealership case, right? We're also now looking at, well, what about price to market? So we're actually looking at the entire market in Spain, and we're going to see if price to market, how that correlates with sales. We would expect that that would have a strong negative correlation. That's what our intuition would say. Why? Because as price to market goes down, meaning the price of the car goes down, you would expect the likelihood of it selling to go up. What we're finding early on, there's not enough data in our sample size to say this is a hard truth, but what we're seeing right now is the correlation is very slightly negatively correlated. So similar to the VDP views, it's on the correct side of the spectrum, but not nearly as strong as we originally thought. However, that could change once we get more information. So that's kind of an early tidbit. I'll be talking about that later this year or early next year once we have enough information to make these results more conclusive.
Okay, all right. So Dan, thank you so much for your observations. We certainly do appreciate it. If you have a follow-up question, hey, we're here. All right, so next question, let's do this one from Andy. Andy says, did you see a correlation between the point total and where the vehicles were in the initial filter or /sort? For example, if you have 25 of X and page 4 never gets views, does the location of the initial filter have a bearing on overall sales or results?
So that's an excellent question, and it shows that you understand the concept very well to ask a very pointed question like that. So
yeah, Andy's
awesome.
Smart.
I'm super excited. So that's if we were only looking at VDP views, then that would have an effect, provided that, you know, like you said, if we're in a situation where if you look at the SRP page of a dealership, and in that dealership's case, which is almost generally universally true, but I'm just stating it so we're all on the same page. If most dealerships, if they always show their SRP, search result page, in the same way, the first page of vehicles generally gets more views than the other vehicles because people aren't going to page through more cars. If we were only looking at VDP views, then that would have an effect. However, the fact that we're looking at behavior means that we don't need to have gonzo amounts of VDP views on every single car in order to get an assessment, because we're looking at, we could have 1 or 2 people checking out a vehicle, but doing it and spending time and starting to fill out lead submission forms and doing all this stuff, and that's where the gold is. That's where you can find out if people are interested. Now, I'm not going to say, to your point, there are certainly going to be cases, and I touched on this towards the very end, if a dealership just doesn't have enough traffic, then things start to fall apart a little bit, because now you're dealing with a very, what we call sparse data set, a very sparse, you know, things, you don't have much in there. There are a lot of zeros because you don't have many events on anything, and then that becomes a problem, you know. But that was an excellent question. I'm glad. Let me know if you have other questions.
Thank you, Andy. Great question. All right, let's get to this one from Bruce. Hi, Bruce. He says, how could we use these data sets to measure the performance of our vendors? For instance, pay-per-click, chat, retargeting. Is that something, Noah, have you ever tried applying these principles to other than just car sales?
Totally understand where you're coming from. So we've never touched on the information needed to do what you're saying, and here's why. In order to do that, you would need to collect identifiable information about the people visiting your website, which is possible. But what I explained to you using Google Events, what I gave you only gives you aggregated totals. So it only gives you the total number of events per car or in essence per VDP in your inventory, which means that there's nothing in that total that tells you this click came from this person that came from this refer or source. You know, they came in from this. So they came from cars.com when they visited your website.
Right, right.
If you added that, which would require some more work, and off the top of my head, I'm not capable of just saying you would have to go here and here to do that. But you would need to know, at the very least, for example, the device and the referrer in a way, things that identify the person so that then you can track where they came from and then do the same thing. The risk is the more you start separating the information, so instead of just having the total for the number of events, you start separating it by people, you start thinning things out. So you kind of need more information to compensate for the fact that you're thinning things out across all these different, you're in essence, the statistician would say you're increasing the dimensions. You're adding more columns because you're saying, instead of just saying, how many times did this happen on this page, we're now saying, well, how many times did this person on this page do something? And now you've like really kind of thinned it out. So you have to compensate that with a little more data. So that's the drawback. But you can do it. It's possible. It requires more work. But you could do that. And what I didn't touch on is kind of restating what you said, which was if you did have that information, then you would be able to see how different people were reacting from different sources on your VDPs. And in essence, now you're kind of grading the person visiting instead of the car. And then you could use that information to go back to vendors that in various aspects, whether there's traffic or whatever else, and say, okay, this is what they're doing, and this is a metric I'm using to measure that. And you hear a lot of people talk about engagement and measuring that. It's something that's coming more and more common when you visit trade shows.
Right, right, right. Okay, Bruce, fascinating. Thank you very much for that question. All right, Noah, you're doing good. We only have a handful more questions, and then we can close out the show because we certainly are past the top of the hour. Okay, Whitney has the next question. Whitney writes, when using machine learning to help predict the sales based on the event scoring index, how did dealers then use this to help increase sales? How did they use these insights to take better actions? I think this was before you talked about price restructuring. So she had that question come in a little early.
Okay. Circle back around. I'll just restate it super quick. But yeah, if you look at the last 3 slides of the principal part of the webinar, which are outcome 1, 2, and 3, you'll see specific examples of how they can take those predictions, whether they're generated from the model that we created by hand that we walk through in this webinar, or if you decide to automate it a little more and try and get a little more precise with machine learning, a little more slick, the same principle applies. You could take those predictions and, at least in the pre-owned sphere, we could talk about repricing vehicles using that information in a more intelligent way. Again, going back to what I said at the beginning, it's not about replacing your intuition. It's simply about augmenting it so you can make a better decision more confidently about the vehicles in your inventory. But take a look at those slides. That should help you.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, Whitney, great question. Thank you so much. All right, Joey, how are you, sir? I'm glad you made it to the show today. Joey writes, how do multiple websites affect this process? For example, we have an OEM mandated website, the dealer group portal site. We have a local website, not OEM. We also have autotrader.com and cars.com. Noah, if you were a dealership and had all those websites, and by the way, Joey's not alone on this.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. So how do you set that up?
Okay. So there are a couple parts to answering that question, because it's a scenario with a couple pieces in it. The first component is, let's start with the cars.com first and the auto traders, your third-party listing sites. What we found with our work is that the VDP that a cars.com and auto trader presents to the user is not nearly as feature-rich as the VDP of a particular store. If you compare your VDP to that of what cars.com or auto trader is presenting, it's much less generic. It's much more tailored to your dealership. There are more things people can do. So there's a lot of more meaningful actions that people can take on your VDP. First of all, unless you're able to connect to them directly and do something, you can't do it. So it's almost like number one, it's kind of impossible. But number two, we found that we kind of not interested in that information because what happens on your website is going to be a better representation of what your customers think, because you can see more different things that they can do. You can study a more diverse set of actions and behaviors on your VDP because it's custom and tailored to your dealership. Now, the other part of that is, okay, within my dealer group, I've got OEM mandated site, I've got a group site, I've got my own site, I've got some other site. I mean, I've seen this scenario a lot. Unless the VDPs themselves are identical amongst those websites, I would not encourage you to combine event data that you collect from those different websites. Because a call to action on one VDP that looks a little different on another, you can't statistically say it's the same thing. So if on one website you have a get e-price button that takes up half the screen that people think they have to touch to just get rid of it or something, people are going to click on that even though they don't care. But on another site, if someone clicks on it, that might mean that they're really interested in that car because they want to get an e-price. So because each VDP, if they're different, you can't really combine them. It's a challenge. What I would suggest to dealers in this situation is choose the domain that drives the most traffic and start there. And you should be able to get what you're looking for just by looking at that one site. And I kind of want to say people that have a group site and try to drive traffic to the group site are performing better than those that are driving traffic to the individual stores. But that's a little word of mouth on my end. So I'm not going to say that with certitude or something that's backed by something. That's just through conversations with dealers.
All right. I'm not sure certitude is a word, but I'm going to take your answer. All right.
All right. I like Stephen Colbert, so there's a truthiness to that word. You knew what I was saying.
I do love truthiness. All right. All right, Joey, thank you so much. It's always good to hear from you, sir. All right. Just a couple more questions, and then we'll start closing out the show. All right. Next question. Let's do this one from Devon. Devon says, what about multi-factor correlation? Maybe VDP views plus some other factor is correlated with sales. Usually you have a vehicle in mind after VDP view before other actions.
Absolutely. And that's where what you described is phenomenal, and that's why a lot of companies, like going back to the very beginning when I taught, Google, all these guys, Spotify, Netflix, they're employing machine learning because it allows you to do any type of combination of that you want. Neural networks. If anyone listening has heard of neural networks, my God, I love you right now. But that principle is a concept within machine learning that exactly handles that situation. Not only, let's not weight just what a single action is, combinations of actions are important. The problem is doing that by hand becomes a challenge because the number of scenarios you have to cover really blows up. So at that point, I really would recommend that you use some sort of automated statistical modeling technique, and machine learning is sort of tailored to that. So it allows to handle those situations where you say, well, if they do this, this, and this, then that means something. But if they do this, this, that's a totally different message, So order can matter and it can be tracked, but doing it by hand with the technique we outlined would become very cumbersome very fast.
Okay. All right. Well, let me just tell you, Devon followed up with, this is brilliant. One of the best DealerOn Webbies ever. Your topics are always in line.
Thank you so much. That means the world to me. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Eliana and Noah. Oh, thank you so much, Devon. It's always nice to hear from you. Follow up also from Dan. He says, yes, I've heard of neural networks, but it is kind of too complex to sell within the dealership. The technology is more sophisticated than I think our sales managers can grasp. Well, you might be right on that one, Dan. I'm not going to argue on that one. And Lee wrote in, I just realized that I'm a nerd. I love this stuff. Lee, I'm glad we could service your nerdiness today.
Right on. Right back to you. Love it.
All right. Let's go to this question from Julian. Julian says, do you have any resource recommendations for becoming more proficient with Google Sheets?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't have a good resource. So here's what I'm going to do. I don't have a good answer off the top of my head. I'm going to, if you just leave your email in the chat or provide to Eliana, and I'll have her pass it to me.
You know what, Julian? Email him directly. His email's right there on the screen.
Perfect. Even better. Exactly. What am I thinking? Email me directly, And by the end of the day, I'll give you a link or two that are good places to start. I don't have anything off the top of my head, but I promise I'll get back to you.
Perfect. Okay, couple last comments, and then we're going to close out the show. Dan wrote back, and he says, I think we should schedule a webinar with David. I'm very interested in the topic of transitioning a successful multi-generation dealership from baby boomer to millennial, especially with the younger generation bringing in modern technology, which often is not a focus of the boomer dealer principles.
Well, I know he would be very open to doing that. I don't know how. I don't know if Eliana wants to deal with someone like me or him.
Wait, does he speak English better now or what? No.
Oh, no. I mean, he lived in the States for close to 10 years. He's married to an American, and he worked at Microsoft. So it was that the translator period was just really one semester, maybe a year. But now he speaks English incredibly well.
Bravo, bravo. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll talk about it next time, okay? Dan, thank you so much for the suggestion. I love it. All right, last question comes in from Dixon. Dixon wants to know, was it your voice on the EA Sports "It's in the Game" tagline?
No, it wasn't. They had that voice well before I was there. And I learned very quickly. I went... it's a funny story, and I'll keep it short because I know we're going long. But when I got that job, I was over the moon, and I'll admit I kind of bragged a little bit about it. And what I learned very quickly was that the minute you let people know that you work at a video game company, especially as big and as popular as EA Sports, everyone starts thinking you can get them free games.
Oh yeah.
So I was getting hit up with free games all the time. So within less than a month, I really started telling people, yeah, I work as a software engineer at, Northern Orlando and Maitland. And they're like, oh, okay, and they'd move on. Unbeknownst to them, I was developing video games. But it was a great experience, great company. I still miss the people I worked with, and they do cool stuff. So, yeah, it's in the game.
It's in the game. All right. Noah, really fascinating, eye-opening presentation. Thank you so much for bringing it to us. Really, really loved it. I thought it was brilliant. So want to remind the audience that a link to download a copy of this webinar recording is going to be emailed to you later today for your reference. Feel free to share it with your friends and colleagues. It was really cool, wasn't it? Today's webinar is also going to be posted online within 24 hours. Just go to DealerOn.com/webinars to view our upcoming webinar schedule or access any of our past webinars too. And this webinar is going to conclude in just another minute. When it does, you're going to get a short survey. Very short. 3 questions, baby. Please fill it out. We're always looking for quality feedback from our audience. We want to know what you thought of today's presentation. I loved it, but my vote doesn't count. Yours does. All right?
It does to me, so it means a lot.
Thanks. But we need you to fill out that survey. It really helps us out, all right? And invitations will be going out tomorrow for our next DealerOn webinar, 6 steps to increase your fixed ops CSI. Can it be done? Well, let's find out. It's not an understatement to say that many dealerships struggle to maintain a high fixed ops CSI, striking that delicate balance between making the customer happy and making a great profit. Well, that's kind of a challenge. Would you like to increase your fixed ops CSI? Heck yeah, you would. For this important topic, we brought in consumer engagement and CSI analytics heavy hitter, Curtis Nixon. His exclusive process has helped dealerships boost fixed ops CSI by as much as 2 to 7 points. This essential 1-hour webinar is a detailed presentation where he will share his no-fluff practical guide to increasing your fixed ops CSI. Curtis will first discuss consumer experience lifecycle trends that are impacting you right now and the result-driven processes that you need to know. Next, you'll learn how to use data and technology to achieve consistent results, build trust, and create the ultimate consumer experience. And last, Curtis will present you with a clear blueprint to jumpstart your CSI improvement efforts over the next 30 days and beyond. In the end, attendees will leave with a step-by-step approach on how any dealership can start increasing their fixed ops CSI with the very latest tools and techniques. That's what we call a win-win-win, people. If you want to know how to maintain a 90-plus score in your fixed ops CSI, because it is integral to the success of your dealership, then you just can't afford to miss this presentation. So register now. And don't forget, DealerOn's weekly webinars are every Thursday at 12 noon Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Mountain, and 9 a.m. Pacific. If you have questions, comments, or suggestions regarding our webinars and our topics, feel free to contact me. I'd love to hear from you. My name is Eliana Raggio, and I'm everywhere. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Google+. I'm on all the automotive social networks. Or you know what? You can just email me directly at eliana@dealeron.com. Thank you all so very much for spending this time with us today, and I hope to see you all on another webinar in our continuing education series. Take care.